Let me go here. Sorry, you guys. We'll be up 1 second. Hey.
Oh. Yeah, no worries. Thank you. It's all good. Also here.
Well, there it is. Look, it became somehow. Now it's working. I couldn't get that.
Good, how are you?
Okay, so fun and exciting things today. We'll talk about a little bit more about sniffing attack because we're gonna need to do that in order to do any man in the middle or section hijack, right? So I got a little bit of crazy last night after I wanted to leave the lab as it was, otherwise it would have been like 500 steps. Because after I uploaded the lab, I had felt like, oh, maybe I can have them do an application server and, you know, put JavaScript on it and have somebody logged in. And, but you know, that we can reserve some of that for later or a different activity, and also a different class. Okay, so you are gonna do a little bit of setting up your target, your own target today, and then be able to scan it. You know, I rewrote the lab 3 times, so we'll be able to get things going. So sorry, let me get caption real quick. Okay, so today we're gonna go over the next unit. I know that we talked about sniffing attacks before. And then we looked at some of the sniffing tools, but today we're going to focus on some of the areas that we can expand on instead of talking about passive and active attacks or tools. So, and how we can transition from sniffing attack into other forms of attack. Sniffing is usually part of recon, but you know, we can perform sniffing attack concurrent with other tools for man in the middle. So basically, it is a way to identify the type of traffic or services that you have on the network. A lot of the times it is an unauthorized way of intercepting or monitoring network traffic. They just need to attach themselves to the network that you're on, perhaps wireless, perhaps a public network, or through a device, right? Fish a device, have them click on it, and then be able to sniff through that employee's device. So they could use hardware or software, and I'll show you some of the hardware that can be used, and the same type of hardware that we would use for the administration side for IT. And the whole point is to really gain access to the system. So to answer number 1, it asks you, what is sniffing attack and why is this type of attack difficult to detect in the network? So it involves unauthorized interception or monitoring of network traffic. So basically, it is used to capture all the activities that's happening in the network environment, the services, perhaps, you know, IPs, some system information, if unencrypted passwords are being sent, session ID for session hijack, because the token, it uses ID, and we'll touch on that as the second part. And it's difficult to detect because a lot of the times they would use passive sniffers like Wireshark. Now, some sniffers, as we learned in the prior chapters or units, that they are not passive, they are active. So it will contact the system, right? Or send packets to the target. So, and other sniffers like Wireshark or even TCP dump, you would see that it's kind of like the wallflower, right? The camera, the surveillance camera that's on the road and watch all the cars that goes by. So because they are passive and they don't interact with the systems, sometimes they go undetected. Now, to really combat sniffing, we have to think about what kind of things that are being used to sniff. Okay. That means that we also have to monitor our network a little bit more. We need to make sure that our rules for intrusion detection systems are up to date and that really reflect the security that we need on the network. So, because if we're lax on the detection mechanism, what will happen is a lot of things is gonna go by and we won't know. So the purpose of performing sniffing attack, as you can see there, ultimately they want to gain sensitive information. Sniffing attack is the gateway to other attacks, right? If they can capture the session ID, that's what they're gonna use for session hijack, because everyone uses HTTPS mostly. But if they can capture a password, that can be used to access a certain account and then possibly do escalation of privilege. So login credentials, personal data, I think we touched on this before where they would look at not just the header of the packets, but some part of the packets where unencrypted data is being passed. And then in some cases, financial details might be shown in the data piece. And then to really have other form of attacks, they would also look at vulnerabilities because ultimately, right, security attacks are really built on exploiting vulnerabilities. And the tools in security really address that, right? So if you look at Metasploit or other type of toolkits, those really capitalize on vulnerability of system, OSs, top protocol, right? Network designs. A lot of the times we look at protocols and services as, what kind of vulnerabilities that exist. And once they found the vulnerabilities, they would exploit them. And it's a way to gain access to information because we know that data is asset and it's important for us to protect and also look at what the attacker is targeting. So as a pen tester, right, we have to expect that they are sniffing out the network. So when you pen test, you would do the same thing. And you would also look at what is being exposed or what kind of vulnerabilities your systems have. So in an attack, how does an attacker extract the information from the network traffic capture? So when you use Wireshark or TCP dump or EtherCap is a little bit more comprehensive where it also performs attack within, and you see some of that today. When you sniff it out, you would have to, basically it's gonna pull the packet headers and, looking at the protocols. So systems are communicating with one another using headers, right? So packet headers, and then the content of the packets, payload information, encrypted data, hello. So when you have encrypted data, for example, if you're using TLS on HTTPS, likely that's happening a lot, then we, as pen tester, would have to decrypt that data to see, right? How hard is it to decrypt the data? As I was talking to my 41A class last night, right, encryption is really a good solution for a lot of things, but sometimes encryption can be slow, and sometimes weak encryption can also be vulnerable, right? So you have to really think about the type of encryption you use. So in a network, right, we would have a lot of streaming encryption for things to pass, and if you have encrypted data, usually passwords are encrypted. If you're using TLS, the data is encrypted. So to really break that, they would have to decrypt the data. And decrypting data means a few things, right? A lot of the times just capturing the key is the goal. So let's say that if I need to enter a house, a mansion, right? I'm not gonna try to break down the iron gate, right? Sometimes that just needless effort. You don't need that. You just trying to lure the people who has the proper key and capture it. Okay, so a lot of the times it's like that. So this is why pretexting and social engineering is really big in the area of attacks, because they need the credential, they need the keys. Brute forcing, yeah, that's gonna raise the alarm right away. Okay, so that should be like the last resort. A lot of the times we would defer to how the keys are stored, where it's stored to decrypt the data. Okay,
What's last?
I'm sorry.
What's last?
Yeah, if you brute force, a lot of the times you get locked out, or sometimes it's gonna take a lot of resource for your system to brute force things, to break encryption or encryption keys, right? So encryption algorithm, sometimes we would have to exchange keys. So find a way to capture that key exchange or where that key is stored. Okay. Any question? Okay, so there are some tools. There are a lot of proprietary tools that you would see. A lot of the proprietary tools is going to give you all the cool features, the graphs. Some of them have AI incorporations. And then you can also use it in a company with your security management system. So there are cool stuff that are out in the market now. And here I put down some protection for sniffing attacks, right? We do have tools to detect that, but a lot of the time we defer to monitoring and intrusion detection system. And then you have to have a layered security approach, right? Defense in depth is always going to be the key. You don't just fix the problem by a couple of things. You fix the problem by many things. So encryption, use secure protocol, your security appliances, configure the rules for those, patch the system, update your software, your firmware is really important. And then network segmentation is also good. Isolate the network that has sensitive information and then protect that network using firewall and other measures. And then access control implementation, permissions and privileges, and then multi-factor authentications and strong passwords, right? So here are some of the tools that you would see out in the market for hardware. So anytime you see network tab, you often would know, so I have to physically attach it to a network device like a switch. Usually a bigger or a small switch on the network. And so that means that I have to physically be able to access your organization's network. Okay. So there are many different types. And then if you want to use the Hack 5, and this is made for pen testing purposes, they have a bunch of really cool stuff now. I have the Land Turtle. I don't have the Shark Jack, but you can find some of the information there. And they range from like maybe $80 to $100+ depending on the technology. But a lot of them, like the LAN tab, is just a network tab. So if you look at the picture, I put the link in there for you. So hold on. Click it so you can see. It's simply you're gonna have to have cable connection to it. It is Ethernet based.
You want anything modified?
I'm not that strong electronically. I do know the wiring for Ethernet and I play with some electronic boards, but I've seen people actually use dev boards. Those are little microcontrollers. So on here, there's a chip, that they are. And then they program it and it has USB capability. So I'm sure you can program those. Yeah, you can buy Chinese websites sell those deaf board for very small amount, a couple of dollars. But yeah, Amazon also sell deaf boards, so if you look at some deaf boards, but they do, so they made it into an enclosure and have the jack or the connection here, and it's $80. Okay, so out of the box, it has the capability, and then you can power it through USB connection. Kind of interesting, right? So that's the LAN bug. And then on the wireless side, these are some of the ones that we've seen already. Kismet has a whole set of modules specifically for Bluetooth and wireless scanning. And then Kane Enable, they've had stuff, but you would see, we're gonna do a little bit of TCP dump today. This is old school, but good, right? You cannot finish a security program and courses without knowing TCP dump because it's repeated in many classes. Ethernet also been around. You've seen Wireshark already. Network Miner, some of you took forensic with me. You've seen this. Network Miner is really good for forensic, but it can also be used to capture network traffic. So if you need to investigate, this is a good tool. They have the upgraded version where you can pay, but the free version is also okay, right? So these are some of the common ones. So we are gonna use Ettercat today. But that has an attack mode with it. Okay. And then there are network analyzer, aka sniffer. So you would see the same, but you know, they come in. So Microsoft used to have a thing called Microsoft Network Monitor. They did away with it a while ago. They replaced it with Microsoft Message Analyzer, which I thought the name is not cool. It doesn't really reflect anything that's network based, but I think possible that because it is trademark and copyrighted their design or whatever, right? So they try to stay with the name. But anyway, so you can go to the link and look at the requirement for the download. Snort, we've heard of this, and then Caspa. Okay, so we are gonna operate in promiscuous mode today for most of the part that we're gonna be doing. And so in that, you're gonna see that all the capture that happens with a lot of the passive ones, it needs this mode to operate, okay? Another way that we can do this is through port mirroring, basically taking a port, right? And passing it to another port, but we're gonna duplicate the network traffic. So it's kind of like this, right? You have a camera, right? That's recording all the cars that are going by. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the images of that camera and you're gonna transfer it to another camera, right? So it's duplicating the information of that traffic through that particular port only. So you can attach a device to it, you can monitor the network and then pass the same traffic to another monitor or another sensor system. But we port mirror a lot in network environment for monitoring purposes, okay? So, you know, every network that I've been to and I also design, right, we port mirror quite a bit. So when you hear the term mirror, it's just basically duplicating all the traffic that's passing through. So that way it can be seen, okay? And in an enterprise environment, you betcha you're gonna have to port mirror. Okay. All right. Any question? Okay, so in the next question, it says, how can an attacker capture the traffic on the network using a hardware device? Right, basically connect network tapping or monitoring device. And that could be varied, right? If you get a network tap, some systems are more than others, depending on the feature that it has. And you would connect it to a switch port. So simply port on the switch and be able to monitor by capturing the network traffic. You can set up port mirroring, you can just use that and making sure that everything. So basically when they do the tap, everything passes through them before passing through the switch, okay? So that means that on the backbone, you're gonna have the uplink switch That's gonna send all the signal to the main switch, and the main switch is gonna connect to the router. So they have to physically connect to the main switch or the uplink switch. And the uplink switch, all of that is funneling all the traffic back to the main switch. Okay, so for example, I would have an uplink switch, let's say at Norfolk College and Moreno Valley College and RCC. All of those are gonna funnel back to the district network where they would have the main switch to send that out to the router. It's kind of like the main road to your highway, right? And your router is where the highway is. So all the main roads is gonna funnel back to that. So you need to tap it at where that main road is before it reaches the highway. So you can see, and it coming back from the router, right? When we exit from the highway, we're gonna have to hit the main road to go to the smaller area, the smaller town, Norfolk, NVC, or RCC. So through that, you're gonna also see external traffic coming in and internal traffic leaving. So you have to know where to tap in order to do that, right? So physically, when we monitor from our side, from the defensive side, we have to pick where, right, that all the roads gonna lead to that main road that's gonna come go to your router and your internet service provider. Okay. So where do I tap on your home network? Where can I go to find all your traffic inside your network? Where? Your wireless router, right? It has connection. I just need to be able to access your Wi-Fi to see everything, right? So, or I can just attach to your Wi-Fi, run Wireshark, and I can see everything. That's why protect your wireless network, because war driving is still a thing. If you ever drive by the neighborhood and if you look on the ground and if they have carving or marks, right? Sometime, and if you can look them online, there's a cheat sheet, and they would have certain symbol, right? So if you pay attention on the curb or sometime on the sidewalk, they would mark it. So basically that just tells you that that particular network that's nearby is open sesame, right? Like there's a lot of activities that goes on and you can attach to. I know this because I'm old school and I've learned the tricks from some of the people that've done it. All right, any question? Okay, so on the next part, I just want to introduce you to Kismet Wireless. We will visit Kismet. So when we do the wireless lab. Okay, so Kismet been around for a long time. If you go to sechtools.org, they list all the security tools that you need to know, or the mainstream one anyways, outside of the other websites that promote the tools. But if you look, you guys know what BTLE stands for? Sounds good right now, but no. So if you buy wireless headphones, earphones, a lot of the Bluetooth technology, they are BTLE. They are low energy type of Bluetooth technology. Those don't take a lot of energy to run or charge, right? And then you see a lot of like the IoT devices on here. Zigbee is also used for things like drones, toys, stuff like that. A lot of the kids' toy uses near field communication where it's just radio waves. But you do see drones and stuff using Zigbee. So just different type of communication channel and waves. So it's able to scan that, right? Okay. So on here, when you visit the website, you just describe the capability of Kismet, and all you have to do is just read the beginning of it. It's already telling you. So it is an open source sniffer. It can work as a wireless intrusion detection system, war driver. So what I described earlier, where people drive around the neighborhood and find the the network that has good stuff, right? That's war driving. And then packet captures tools for Wi-Fi or Bluetooth and BTLE. Okay. It operates headless and standalone capture, so you can use it for intrusion detection type of monitoring. You can use it for pen testing purposes. And it works with various hardware, so you can adapt it to the hardware tool or the network tab that you're using. And then even integrating to your servers. So it doesn't have to be a device. You can set up a system, right? Or even set up some type of system as a proxy and then use some of this if you have wireless device attachment or endpoints. Okay. So obtain some of that information and put it in here, or you can summarize it. So how can you protect against sniffing? Well, in the notes, you can find that in the sniffing section. We said that we can use encryption, right? It's important that we think about encryption algorithm, keys, length of the keys and how the keys are being exchanged and stored. Virtual private networks, especially in the areas of remote access. Intrusion detection system, your IDS, those are your alarm systems. So when things are hitting your network, it would sound off. Now, those don't prevent, they don't kick it off, right? It just tells you that it's there. Monitoring, so another detection mechanism. Network segmentation, isolating the private, super private network. So if if you think about like a hospital, and I think I gave the scenario before, where you have that segment of the network where the doctors, the nurse, right, all the staff, they use wireless devices, because most doctors now, they come to see you with a tablet, right, or some kind of laptop, and that's a requirement. It's because that they can go to room. It's easy to maintain. They can put it in their pocket if it's small enough. Or the nurses would have these carts that are wireless, and they would bring it to the room to service the patient. They would update the records right there, because HIPAA compliant, that, your records have to be digital, but it has to be protected. But the transmission of your information has to be encrypted. So the wireless network of your physicians and your nurses needs to be segmented and private, where compared to your patient wireless network or your guest, the visitor. When you go to the hospital nowadays, you want to use wireless because there are people who are still, answering their email while they're recovering, whatnot, right? So you would have network segmentation for the physician and the nurses and the staff for that part of the wireless. And, we can do it several ways. We can set up a VLANs, we can set up different IP addresses and then have it routed into it and then set up firewalls for it. There are many things that we can do to design that part of the network. But segmentation is important, okay? Strong password and authentication method using multi-factor. And then you can say patching, updates, all of those things are important. You're going to keep hearing these things in a lot of the solutions, right? And then implementing each one on the technical side, we would have to know how to do that. So some of the common tools are also listed in the notes. You just need to pick up a few. I put down Wireshark because it's popular. TCP dump, that's popular for Linux system. So if you're using Linux, TCP dump is good. There's also Wireshark built into Kali for the one with the graphical user interface, but you can also use T-Shark, which is the terminal versions of it. You're gonna see that like the terminal ones, right? It's gonna display the text. It's very verbose, so it's not very organized and pretty and color-coded like Wireshark. So this is why a lot of people prefer Wireshark for things that have graphical user interface, because information just look nicer, more organized. But you can definitely take the data that you get from TCP dump, put it into a file, right? Like a CSV and process it, right? That's what the job of an analyst. So, and then you'll be able to interpret, oh, okay, these are the type of packets that I'm looking at. And that's gonna conclude that this might be the vulnerability that we're gonna be facing, and how do we fix that, right? And then you have snort, but you can put the others. Yeah. I think they provide service, and they also have proprietary tools through their company. Questions? Yeah, their logo used to be, I think it still is, a little pig. Snort. Okay. Any question on sniffing? Okay, now next part. More fun. Okay, so sniffing and then what, right? Sniffing and then sidejacking or session hijacking. So hijacking really breaks down to capturing session ID. So when the systems are communicating in a secured manner, there's security tokens that's being given. So the server is going to give the requested system tokens. So for example, when you're logging in to pay your bill, right, or fill out your financial aid application, anytime that you're using HTTPS and logged in, authenticated, right, that session is secure. Okay. They want to make sure that it's protected so that way, you know, someone cannot just see your sensitive data, like your account, your credit card information, transactional information on their end. So that means that security tokens needs to be given for that session. Now, someone can capture that session ID and impersonate you. So because you're given a security token, well, I can capture your token and become you. So let's say that you are buying something online, maybe a new pair of shoes that you really like. And I know that, right? When I capture your session, I would impersonate you by using that session ID. And then I would eventually maybe modify your data or even take your data. Right now, a lot of e-commerce website, they don't, you know, once you input your credit card information, they don't display the entire credit card information. Very rare that they do. They only show the last few digits, right? But I can maybe modify shipping information so that way those shoes will come to my house instead of yours. Redirect you. So when you click submit, right, you don't know that I'm actually already pretending to be you and submit before you. Just redirect you to the homepage of Amazon or whoever that you buy from, right? So in a session hijack, a lot of the times you see that, right? They impersonate to be you or your system. So now how can they do that? Well, there's several ways that you can do that. You can brute force the ID because the algorithm for these ID for the tokens is not too difficult, right? There are tools that we can use to brute force. So enumerating through these values. So this is a captured example, and I took this from OWASP because that's also a good resource to look at when you're looking at web security and web application. So if you're looking at some website like this, the token is going to come across something like this. So, and I can determine a pattern. Sometimes that's called guessing, right, for sidejacking. But I can use an enumerating system to just try out different values because ultimately they are characters. A, B, C, A through Z, and then 0 through 9. Yeah, but the longer they are, right, that's just going to take a little bit longer for me to enumerate through and have a match. They can also find pre-calculated algorithms. So because these are non-random, you can find calculators and things like that, or be able to determine the algorithm for calculation. An algorithm just means procedures or steps.
How would you know if you see malware? Like, is it written in a language?
Yeah, it could be. A lot of the time, yeah, malware is coded.
How would I know if I see it like posted? Like,
How?
or something, how would I?
So if it's already compiled, you have to decompile it to look at the source code. So you have to reverse engineer it. But if it's not, how do you know if it's malware? A lot of the times, as a user, your security software should detect it. But as a security engineer, you have to reverse engineer it because sometimes it might not be a malware. It just maybe just a script, right? So reverse engineering, you have to decompile and look at the source code and then read the code. Sometimes low level. Okay. But for this, they can steal your session ID and capture it. So you guys gonna test today, okay? And a lot of the concept, people think that it's on the fly, right? You watch Mr. Robot. I know some of you have. Or some of the show, they make it look very fast and easy, and you already know the game. Sit and wait, right? So when you do the attack, even though it's on the same network, right, and we don't have to bypass any firewall, it's gonna take some time because a lot of the time, the tools, the script, the things that are used, it's looking at the conditions. So all of these are the loops, the conditional statements that's being applied. So you have to wait, okay? But capturing the session ID, so once the ID is captured, you see it like this, okay? And then they would be able to use it in the session, so they would be able to submit it as you. Sometimes have to spoof addresses also, because on the server end, a lot of the times we set it up to where it would make sure that, it matches. Kind of like, when they ask you to sign off on a package, let's say that if it contains things like alcohol, they're gonna say, hey, show me your ID to make sure that your birthday and all of that matches, right? So some system would need to validate like, oh, the recipient is this matching IP. So with that, the tool needs to have spoofing incorporation. So here it talks a little bit about the session that I talked about, okay, for the HTTPS request and the session that's established. Okay. Oh, I forgot to give you the answer for A. So the techniques of sniffing, there are promiscuous mode, that's passive, capturing traffic without interfacing the target or the other systems. It is difficult to detect. And then port mirroring, we set that use the switch port to duplicate the traffic that's passed by through a port. And for the session hijack, number 9, it asks you the purpose of the session hijacking. Hello. And the type of attacks that's performed in the session hijack. So the attacker would gain unauthorized access to the user's device by stealing the session ID. And you don't have to put it verbatim, right? You just have to understand that they would sniff and then trying to get the session ID information. And once they have that security token or the session token, they would use that token to take over the control. So they need to intercept the traffic between the client and the server, take that ID through eavesdropping or monitoring, and then compromising the device. Often that you would see man in the middle being incorporated with session hijack because the interception piece, right? So they have to stand between you and the server if you are the client. So man in the middle attack can be used for the session hijacking. to intercept and manipulate the data. Because if I'm man in the middle now, when I do the session hijack, I want to impersonate you. So I don't want you to receive the data, right? I want to directly interact with the server that you were using. So for the company, they have to be able to test their web applications and their systems to really also detect that, right? Nobody's gonna want to make a purchase from me if I continuously have this issue where someone can intercept and be able to, make the purchase or commit fraud, right? Impersonate the customer. So I was playing around with Microsoft application system. So I'm going to teach you how you can make your system a web server today with IIS. It's really easy. It's like one click. But on it, I'll show you some resources where you can set up an application for your web server. And in that, through the setup, once you install it, it actually has a mechanism where you can detect if someone is performing, SQL injection and, like cross-site scripting and also session hijack at your server, right? So it validates, there's validation mechanism that you can incorporate. And it doesn't mean that, that's better than, Linux type of product like Apache or Nginx. They all have the capability. It's just you have to incorporate that, like you have to configure it and you have to be able to set it up so that way it is effective. Any question? Okay. So as we mentioned, that the session ID or the security token can be compromised in a few ways. They can brute force by using different values, right? 0 through 9 for each of the digits, or A through Z, upper, lowercase, depend. They can calculate the ID by known algorithms. Some of them use non-random generator or even random generator, but not good algorithm for random generators. So that means that if that's the company that we're working for, we have to think about how can we manage the session ID better, right? What kind of technology or implementation or improvement that we need to make sure our session ID is not easily guessed. So or calculated or brute force.
Put the session ID on the search bar, or do you tell?
So that's hijacking. So if you're doing like URL type of, so if let's say that I guess the session for the user, I just put it into the URL because that's what usually that's what the server is receiving, right? So it submits a request to the server, right? So the first time is going to be the get, it's actually a set. So when it sends it back, the server is going to receive that session ID and it's going to say, oh, I trust this entity now.
So just straight over the search bar?
Yeah. Or no, on the URL sometimes. But it depends on the web server. Yeah. So if they program it to just receive the URL and validate it that way, right? A lot of the times there are mechanism that you can check, right? Like check the IP. So because there's SYN and ACK process, because it uses TCP for HTTPS. The server needs to also look at the public IP of the recipient. So if they spoof the IP, they would pass the next level, right? So let's say that if it's just a sales session, right? Someone is or submitting a transactional type of transfer for money. Yeah, if they capture that session, they would inject that into the URL. So they'll do a URL injection with that session ID. And then, but on the other side, they have to make sure that the user can't detect it. So they have to send a packet, right, to the user system, pretending to be the server now, right? And redirect them to the home of that website. A lot of the time, the user don't think of anything if they get redirected home. Oh, maybe
Right.
I couldn't submit or something went wrong, right? But you have to do it in a certain amount of time. Otherwise, right, the user would then process the transaction. And so the window of time is going to be very limited. So you have to like thoroughly thought out the process, right? I would communicate with the server this way, and I would communicate with the client this way. So man in the middle and interception is a harder form of attack, and you have to, and I think for a lot of the attackers with practice, they get better, just like anything else, but using different type of tools. But yeah, they would know like, oh, this server would take this type of packets and so on.
I was thinking from a photography, it's that file, the out in the user system, they keep their data that, the cookies, right?
Yeah.
From Google Chrome and whatnot, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so the cookies, so capturing the cookies is also easy too.
Right, yeah.
Right, that's an easiest way is to get the session IDs instead of intercepting the session ID.
Just get it.
Yeah, but now a lot of the website, it doesn't. So whenever that you go to a website, if you guys ever click back and it loads the same page, it's because of the cookies, right?
Right.
The cookies store the information for that page. So a lot of the web developer, they just use cookie mechanism. So that way the server doesn't have to recirculate the page. But that creates a flaw for the security, because now if the attacker gets the cookies, like what Jose was saying, then they can be the client system,
Yep.
right? But they have to spoof now, right? But because the server, it does check for
Right,
the
that
IP.
is right.
Okay, but on a network too, there are ways to, like, because the public IP comes in with NAT, and then you have to do ARP poisoning and other things. So, you have to think about like, where am I at in this part of the network? What do I need to do as, from an attacker standpoint? Who do I talk to, right? Who do I need to pretend, right? And then passing that to this part of the network, which are the system that is talking to me, and what do I need to do, right? What kind of IP address should I have? What kind of MAC address I should have? So cross-site scripting attack, and then using query injections with string parameter that's just basically injection. So using a Trojan to capture that, or HTTP referral, that's just a system. So whenever I visit like google.com, right? Some company, they might not have hundreds and thousands of systems that are responding. They might only have a few. And then the referrer are just system that's forwarding that to the original or the main system. So the referral also has the header, because think of it like when you're shipping your stuff from here to New York, there's a main post office here and there's a main office in New York. But in between, you might have like these receiving warehouses where your shipment is being passed. That's like HTTP referral. So it's being passed through the system to get there, but ultimately it's not the receiving system. But it checks the label of your shipment, which is your header, to know where that's going to, right? And where to send it back. So the referral also have a lot of information. So if I put up web server, I gotta also pay attention to this too, right? Okay. I really feel like, really understand security is understanding the attacks and security really tells you like how to really protect the system on each end. Okay, so what do they really want to get out of this? A lot of the time information, and that could be monetary advantage. Sometime to modify the data. Right, impersonate someone, that's often. For financial gain or identity theft. And that would jeopardize the user, right? One face identity theft, a lot of the time their credit would go bad or their reputation would change. Same thing with the organization, the integrity of the organization would change. And the intention of the attack, ultimately it caused damage to the assets, which is data, system, and users. I think for a lot of organization, reputation is important, and anytime that you have negative security incidents, you would see that would impact the reputation. Major attacks like what you've seen with Caesar Palace, right? It impacts their reputation. Target, it took them a while to kind of bounce back. T-Mobile, Verizon had recovered from their attack from prior by spending a lot of effort in R&D for security for their systems. Same thing with T-Mobile and Target. Because I think the customers nowadays have a lot of options in how they spend their money and what kind of products they use. So the competition in technology is there, right? Now, sometimes you have an indirect impact where you might hire a security company and that security company was impacted. You probably hear cryptocurrency incidents that happened a while back, right? Last year or so, because the security company that had leaked to, cryptocurrency leaked and one company had gone bankruptcy because of it, right? So, but a lot of the times your service agreement would speak, so sometimes that can't really do anything. They might not be able to give you back your data or your customer, right? Or your money. So. So what are some of the things that you can do to reduce the risk of session prediction or hijacking attack? Right, so session predictions are just guessing, like what we mentioned before for the session ID. So we can use encrypted functions or cryptographic functions because a lot of these things are task-based, so it might not be an entire application, so that will be function-based encryption. We can also use a better random number generator for our session ID and secure it. As I teach computer science, I always tell my students a true random generator uses system time, right, as a seed. If you have a generator that's seed at the same value at the beginning, it is not a true random generator. If it starts at one value, you can predict where it's gonna end up, right, down the line. So that's not a good random generator. Okay, why does the system time impact a good generator or not, right? Well, because a second from now is a different value, right? So when you seed it, 1 second difference, it's going to generate a different value. So a user that logs in half of a second later, right, that even a millisecond later, it is a different value to see, so it is a better generator. Right? Okay, I'll see you next time. Okay.
I noticed that there's no authentication. When you say that it's a weak form of security. Is it, I mean,
For session ID?
yeah,
Well, because of the protocols that we're using, there's your authentication come after that. Or, so it has, or even before that, right? So let's think about it. You go on an HTTPS website. In order to connect to it, you like log in, you have to log in. So once you log in, you already submit the credential. So the authentication system said, oh yeah, that's good. Let's do the trust now, right? So the web server would receive the authorization from the other server, and then it has now the session.
it's more so that it's before authentication really comes into play.
No, after,
Or after.
yeah. But it's a separate component, so you can't really tie authentication into it. That's the prior step. But once it's authenticated, just like here, you log into the network, once you logged in,
Right.
a security token gets sent down. It's the same concept, but remotely.
Right.
Right? But the session ID is really to do what? It's based on the certificate for SSL and TLS. So it's managed through that certificate, right? So we want to make sure that we check the lifespan of the session. Sometime refresh it. And then regularly update and patch. So web servers are always have certain type of risk like this. So you would have, if you have web server or web application system, you are gonna have like, potential cross-site scripting, injection. These are the things that are facing your web server, okay? And every company has web application, so this is not gonna go away anytime soon, right? And it's always changing. But the protocols we use are actually just older protocol anyway. So the common target of session hijacking. So we are gonna use HTTP today, right? But you do see that most sites are now HTTPS. So unencrypted network using an unsecured protocol, like HTTP versus HTTPS. You would see sidejacking. So sidejacking is session hijack, right? It is just a subcategory of that. It's slightly different techniques and tools. Sometimes you can use one set of tools for that too, but almost done. Any question? Okay, let me move 14 down a little, or maybe
It's still on 13.
okay, so let me move 13 down to the next page. So what kind of measures can we implement to reduce the risk in session hijack? Use secure technology, like protocols. So instead of HTTP, we would use HTTPS because that's SSL and TLS. Install updates and patches. You're gonna hear that a lot because that closes out the vulnerability of the software and system. And then just like what we had said earlier in 13, employing session management is gonna be important. And that would entail like timeout, session handling securely, certificate-based protocol like SSL and TLS. implement multi-factor authentication, like what Jose was asking about earlier, password policy. But with that, like, we can do things like validations and other area. So coming into a company as an analyst, you have to really look at what they have in existence for the web application, or if you are a pen tester, you have to evaluate what is there now, right? So if you can jeopardize the web environment, that means that they would need to fix a lot of the problems. So you have to go through each layer. Okay. Thinking about like how you can capture the session. If that session can be captured, that's a problem. Fix that problem. And then looking into certificate base area or encryption area, and then authentication area. So I normally would section it out to separate areas so it's easier to tackle. Yeah, capable to be prone to attack or not. Yeah, sometimes, your tools is gonna give you the result, but you have to interpret it on what area to fix. Did you finish with 13? Okay. Okay, common sign of session hijack. Unexpected changes to session durations and locations. Multiple concurrent sessions with different IP addresses if they don't spoof. Right? The sloppy ones will do that. So you can detect the sloppy jobs. So let's say that you pen test and you don't spoof, right? Their system should see that. Okay. Multiple submissions or requests from different systems for that same session. That should raise a flag right there. Unusual pattern of session activities that could indicate scripted attacks. So when you interview and they ask you, well, what did you learn about ethical hacking? You say session hijack. Okay. What do you learn about that? You say that, well, you can perform this after you sniff, and you can detect it by these things. So how can an organization respond to session hijacking? Right? If you are an incident responder, this question is for you. Okay, most security specialists are in this area, incident responder. You need to terminate the affected session and reset the session token. And that is for the system admin and the web admin area. And if they don't detect that, you have security person, so you need to end that session basically and terminate that token, cannot reuse it. Then you need to notify the user that to change their password immediately. This is the only time that the company will reach out and tell them, hey, change your password. It's been compromised. It might sound like phishing, right? Right, but you can screenshot. I would, so that way they believe you. Because phishing attack is the same way, right? They would say, hey.
Even when you report that shit to, if you was getting like that happened to you, who you tell it?
Well, if you've been phished,
What's up?
if you've been phished, right? Number one, post your account for that or disable it right away. Two, you can report it to the police because, yeah. FBI tracks those things. If you know the sources, they call me a few times about Amazon shipment because I guess they know that I shop on Amazon somehow, and they were like, "Oh, can we get some information? We're calling from Amazon." And I asked them. I said, "Can I have your number so I can call you back?" And usually they hang up. But yeah, USPS sometimes text, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
you can block those. Closing out security loopholes there, step 3, that entails a lot of things, right? That's very general. Okay, and that could be varied from one company to the next. So if you're looking at web, right, just going back to what we had before, looking at the protocols you use, unpatch things, endpoint systems. So 17 talks about what's happening right now, recession hijack, right? 18 talks about the after effect. How can we bounce back? So to recover, a lot of times we have to go back and investigate how that happened, or the scope is, how big or small is it? How many users are impacted, or how many systems are impacted? If there's any data that's jeopardized or compromised. And where did the data go? The hard part, right, after that is, if the data was leaked beyond certain areas, so need to map out where the data go. And then after that, prevention. So go back and fix or update, reconfigure. Sometime train.
I have a question. In
Sure.
theory, if you, say you do a trace route in the terminal, and you're the victim of a man-in-the-middle attack, would it show the attacker's IP?
Potentially, yes. The same thing with ping. So trace out is an ICMP. So basically it's just like, yeah,
Would show that you're being redirected to them into whatever, like Google, for example.
if it's man in the middle, yeah. But if they don't spoof, right? But if they spoof the server system IP, it would show multiple, it looks like a referral. Right, but the same IP, so it would say, maybe 10.2. whatever .x, and then again, 10.2. whatever .x, and then from there it would map it to the destination. But
So,
change it out sometimes because it's using the routers in between. Some routers are told not to report to, so you don't. In Windows, a lot of times it will say more than 30 hops, but it's only reporting some.
Right.
And then a lot of the web security for web services now, like the social media company, they block that from being used. So you can't, your stuff will still get to them, but you can't ping while you're doing it. Right? They go through a security company. So the security company, just like with Whois or any other security services, so it doesn't really report. Sometimes you see it's timing out, and then it would send, because it's sending through, maybe a firewall or the security
Right.
company that's handling them. So it's going into another network and then coming back to their network. Or
it's a
security.
kind of
appliance.
iffy way, but it's potentially would show you the IP.
Yeah, if you can map it, you can, if you can follow the traffic. Basically, following is like monitoring it,
Right. Okay.
but you would, yeah. It's a good idea. All right, if we're finished, let's take a little break, restroom or
Number one.
Yeah.
Scroll to the first question.
Yeah, that's what he's asking to. We're done with 18? Okay. If you want to work ahead on the lab, you're gonna need a drive. I think I should have enough for everybody. I slightly changed the name. I didn't have a chance to update the document that's on there, but it should say CIS27B clone, but it is a 27 regular 27 machine. I made one, but I didn't have a chance to recopy it. I just copied the one that I had for my other class. It should be clean, so. So our Windows 10 is gonna be our target. Kali Linux is gonna be the security pen test machine. Let me stop here.